This is the Vector Optics 1:10 first focal plane LPVO. This is a bit different from the LPVO that I reviewed beforehand. I reviewed the previous Vector Optics 1:10 LPVO, but that was a second focal plane. This one also has a different design, and you will see some of the comparisons in the unboxing portion of this. So, before I go any further and talk about using the optic, why don't we get to the unboxing portion? So this is what comes in the box. You get a vertical box design with the typical Vector Optics branding. This time there is a anime looking guy on one of the ends, and you can see the reticle over here. Inside the box, you have your 5 years limited warranty. You can pause to read what the limited warranty entails, get some foam, and you get your pieces. So you get an extra ring cap, you get a small user manual, you get a adjustment tool, you get a little microfiber cloth that is on a little loop and is inside out turnable, so you'll never lose it. This is actually pretty handy. I think I'm going to put this on my bag. You get some 30mm medium profile rings. These look to be the same rings that I have used in the past. They are good quality, they are machined well, and of course you get the scope itself. Now instead of ring caps, you get these rubber lens covers, which I very much prefer. I'm not a fan of scope caps, but this is perfect for using when in transport. The optic is very lightweight, surprisingly lightweight. I'll get out the scale in a second. You have your adjustment dial, which goes from 1x all the way on the right up to 10x all the way on the left. It is a fairly stiff dial, but I think it'll be fine once it's on top of a gun and you don't have to hold the optic like this. You get 2 turret covers, both metal screw-ins, the adjustment dial, very positive clicks. This is a lot better than the 1:10x second focal plane LPVO that I reviewed a little bit ago. Those are some very positive clicks. And the same is true on the windage dial. Very positive clicks, very impressive. You do have your illumination scale. It is from 1 to 11. And you can just jump from 0 to 11. You have a standard 2032 battery door. This one does not come with the 2032, so I will have to put one in. And you have a focus ring at the front. The scope by itself weighs 582 grams, and when you add the included rings, it jumps to 736 grams. So it has been a few weeks since I have unboxed it, and I've used it on a couple of different guns. I've used it on the Actus L-Core. You can check out the review that went up a few days ago, and I used it on the CZ600 Alpha, which you can check out the review that I made on that a few weeks back. First up, I want to talk about the turrets. The turrets, as I mentioned, were very clicky in the unboxing, and that has held true throughout all of my testing and zeroing across the different rifles. The turrets are really, really, really nice. Very clicky, so much better than the previous Vector Optics 1:10 second focal plane that I had reviewed. Another nice thing is the numbering and the hash marks on the turrets are very clear and really easy to see where you're putting them when you are aiming down your rifle. It's also appreciated that the windage adjustments have the L and the R markings on the turrets of where you're supposed to be going. It does make it a lot easier to quickly adjust to where you need to go instead of having to look on the side to see which way is right, which way is left. So that is a nice change as well. Now, sadly, illumination is still not very good. It's not a fiber dot, it is just in-housing illumination, but the illumination is not very powerful unless it is dusk or dawn or nighttime. You're really not going to be seeing the illumination. The design change to the magnification lever is very much appreciated, and especially when using this scope out on the range, having the arrow be right here was super useful. Again, I didn't have to crane my neck over the top to see what number. I knew that 3 was in the middle. I knew that 2 was right about here. And I know that 10 is all the way on this side. And because the numbers are so close together, there's a little trick you can use. On the inside of the reticle, because it's a first focal plane, you have a large outer ring. If that outer ring is on the edges when you're looking through the scope, you know you're at 6 power. So you can very easily go slightly lower 6 or slightly above 6, but not quite 10. So the zoom adjustment is incredible, and in combination with the reticle makes it super easy to adjust if you need or want to adjust your zoom level. And I'm not sure if it's placebo or not, but this does feel like it has a slightly bigger eye box than the previous Vector Optics 1 to 10 that I reviewed. It's not huge, like this is still a 1 to 10 LPVO, so the eye box is still tight, but it is more forgiving, and I was able to comfortably use it on the Actos L Core, which did not have an ideal pick rail placement relative to the stock, and I was still able to use this perfectly fine. So that is a welcome improvement if it is there, or if it's not, and it's just placebo. Oh well. It still is a good eye box considering the zoom range. Now, these are the rings that came in the box. I wasn't originally planning on using the rings, but I actually found the rings to be pretty good for the applications that I was using them on. The rings, like the rings on the previous one, they're the same one. They're high quality. They're machined very well. I wish these the included rings had a QD disconnect instead of these knobs that you stick something through and tighten up. I prefer quick disconnect style rings, but I understand if they want to save a bit of money and keep the price down. Clarity on the optic is excellent. It is not as good as, say, a $1,500 scope like I have with my Vortex Viper HD. Before the price that you're paying, at sub $500, the clarity is really nice. I could see my 22 LR, my 223, my 762x39 impacts with no problem. Let's talk about the reticle. Being a first focal plane scope, the lower the zoom, the smaller the reticle, the higher the zoom, the bigger the reticle. Now the reticle design is very nice. It is mil-dot adjustment in the reticle, which is not my preferred. I prefer MOA, but it's perfectly usable. At 1x and 1.5x, the reticle is pretty useless in terms of its design. Because it is so small, you can't really gauge what the hell you're shooting at, but that's kind of the point. The LPVO at 1x is really meant for super close quarters. You wouldn't be using this past, I would say, 50 yards. Past 50 yards, you're not on 1x. You should not be on 1x. You should very quickly zoom to literally any other zoom level. But within 50, it works well because you get that bigger donut essentially acts as a red dot instead of that smaller one. That smaller one kind of just disappears into the rest of the smaller reticle details. And that large horseshoe around it will allow you to center your target. So it's perfectly usable on 1x, but it's not very versatile. It's not like a red dot or a prism where you can stretch that 1x out to 100 or more. The reticle is just too small for that. However, once you get to 2x, it becomes very nice. Personally, if I were to have this on any kind of semi-auto like AR type rifle, my default would probably be 2x. 2x gives you a good balance of close quarters and medium distance shooting. You can easily use 2x out to 100, 150, maybe even 200. And you should have no problem at the closer distances. Maybe if you're like within 15, it's going to be too zoomed, but 2x is the perfect zoom range. Now, like I mentioned, on 6x, you get that outer ring covering the very edge of the scope, and you get a really clean look at the reticle that you can stretch out super far. The benefit of using it at 6x specifically is that your eye box will be a lot bigger than it would be at, say, 10x. Now, the 10x is really more for shooting groups or hitting smaller targets out at distance. If you're using this optic in a competition or something like that, shooting steel, you probably are going to want an 8, 7, or 6x zoom to give you that slightly bigger eye box. But the 10x still works very well, and I had no issues using the 10x. Just know that on 10x, your eye box is, of course, going to be the tightest across all of the zoom ranges, which limits your ability. Now, finally, before I get to who the scope is for, I just want to give a couple feedback points on ways that this could be improved. Number one is just offering an MOA version. Number two would be taking this band with these zoom levels and raising it slightly. So this arrow, maybe this becomes a little dot at the top, and then these are raised ever so slightly so you can see the number itself if you want to stay behind the rifle. You can learn where this arrow is pointing based on what you see in the reticle and your knowledge of the scope and where the position is. It would still be nice if this was just ever so slightly raised. Third, make a fiber optic version of this if at all possible, because the illumination could really use a fiber optic dot. And finally, like I had mentioned earlier, some QD scope rings instead of these turn ones. I just think QD scope rings are better, but it's not the end of the world. Overall, my complaints and suggestions are much more limited compared to the previous one that I reviewed, simply because this optic is just really well made. So who is this optic for? Well, this optic, in comparison to the previous 1 to 10x that I reviewed, I think has a lot more use cases. It is still not as light as a red dot, and like I said, on 1x you're pretty limited in your engagement distances for whatever target you're shooting at. However, because the adjustment is so easy to use and it is really easy to see from behind the rifle without having to put your neck up, this optic really can be used for almost anything. And I really mean almost anything. If you're shooting precision bolt action, I probably wouldn't recommend it because 10x is not the zoom level you're going to be looking for. You're probably going to want something in the 5 to 25 or more range, depending on what caliber and distance you're shooting at. However, if your targets are on the larger side, be it an animal if you're hunting, or steel targets, or paper targets if you're doing competition or something like that, this zoom range allows you to adjust for any scenario of those that I just mentioned. If your target is 100 away, maybe you only want to go 4x, and your eye box is going to be perfectly fine, the reticle is going to be nice and clear, and you're going to be able to hit your target very easily. But maybe there's an animal or a steel target further out that you need to hit that's like 2 to 300. Well, change it to 6. Maybe there's a target out at 400, change it to 10. You're going to have no issue. And because of the drops on the reticle, you should have no issue hitting your target, whatever it is. So that is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to check out some other vector optics stuff that I've reviewed their prism, and I've reviewed the previous 1 to 10 scope. I also have a few optics reviews coming up and ones that just came out. I have the Bushnell R5 that I just reviewed, and I also have a Vortex Viper HD coming out eventually. I still don't know when that's going to be because it depends on the rifle build that's supposed to be paired with. But that's it for this week. There are a lot more reviews coming out soon. I don't know exactly when they're going to come out right now because things are a bit busy, but subscribe so you don't miss when they are released. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.